James Curran. I'm chairing this morning's session, and this is the first public meeting of media reform, and it's going to be very, very difficult. It's going to be enormously difficult to reform the press. I was present on the first day of Leavers and Inquiry, as some of you were, and we were told repeatedly that the News of the World scandal was an isolated episode, completely unrelated to the rest of the press, that we were enormously fortunate in having a vibrant, competitive press that is committed to seeking the truth, that occasionally mistakes are made, but in the nature of things, rapid corrections are made wherever possible, and nothing needs to change, nothing should change, and the leaders of the press industry said that for the whole day. And in the face of this united stance, only broken by Paul Dacre and those people wanting to change the press, very warm welcome, do come up, need to come together, make common cause, and exert concerted pressure, which is why we come together today. 3 working groups were set up. Each of them have reported with great efficiency, producing drafts, which are the subject of today's discussion. And the purpose of this morning is to provide feedback and discuss the 3 documents. And I'm going to invite 2 key people from each working party to make a pitch, 5 minutes each. And then we have a respondent. And we've chosen as a respondent in each case somebody who's sympathetic, clever, but likely to cause trouble and be argumentative and critical. And Chris Blackhurst has that role as the editor of The Independent, who will be responding to the working paper on ethics and regulation. And we have Martin Moore from the Media Standards Trust and Angela Phillips from Goldsmiths. 5 minutes each. Who would like to start?
Shall I start? Okay. I would agree with James that it's difficult to reform the media. It's also difficult to come up with a
Angela, use the microphone just
okay. It's also difficult to come up with a single document that will unite all those people who are interested in reforming the media from a slightly different perspective. So that the last few weeks have been one of both fairly fruitful and quite prickly at times debate, but I think that's a good thing. And I think it's very important that the debate continues, that this is part of the debate. I want to set up very clear and right at the start the fact that we all believe in the importance of freedom of the press. I think that probably goes without saying. We need a free, unfettered press that will take on power. But we also need a balancing freedom. And I think that it is the balance that's gone awry. We need a freedom of expression for ordinary people who are attacked by the press. And it is that freedom which to a large extent has been missing. This is why the first change we would ask of medicine is the introduction of the statutory right of reply. For those people who are directly attacked in the media and are not offered the right to defend themselves. We are at a very particular place at the moment because all the old excuses which we've heard time and again of lack of space no longer hold water. The internet provides a technical solution. There is no reason, logistical, moral, legal or aesthetic, why people should not be offered the right to talk back below an article that has reduced them in a place where most people will see it, online. The one thing that those of us who have been meeting under the umbrella of the Coordinating Committee for Media Reform all agree on is that a truly democratic media would not be afraid to allow those people it speaks out against the opportunity to talk back. And this is not an unusual request. The right of reply is statutory in several other European countries. Of course, there needs to be safeguards, and we go into them in some detail in our paper, but the principle should be clear and should be available to all. It is this concept of a new statutory right for everyone that brings me to the second point. Statutory rights need to be backed up by law or by an organisation that has legal power. There are many possible ways in which such an organisation can be established, and the arrangement we have settled on and described in our paper is not the only one. Indeed, many of the organisations involved in the coordinating committee are unsure as yet about exactly how such legal power should be exercised. But again, there was one thing that everyone was clear about. The body that establishes the ethical rules by which news organisations must in future abide must represent not just editors and their chosen representatives amongst the great and the good. It must also represent ordinary working journalists who so often find themselves pressured to break the rules in search for audience share. We do not favour the licensing of journalists or of publications, but we do think that publications should be held to account, and that a representative body equipped with a reasonable range of sanctions should be given that task. In return, such an organisation should be able to provide a degree of protection to those who carry out real journalism. We need to develop an agreed public interest defence that protects real journalism from attacks by those with power and deep pockets, who can and will use the courts against them. We feel that the body that we are suggesting will provide both that protection to real journalism and a degree of protection to members of the public. We feel it should have both functions, that it should uphold freedom of the press. These are the principal changes we need: the right of reply and a representative body that will uphold ethics and protect the kind of journalism democracy requires.
Thanks. I turn now to Martin Moore from the Media Studies Trust. And the microphone.
Just to reiterate what I was saying at the beginning, I'm a participant on the ethics group, but in an advisory capacity because Media Studies Trust will be bringing out its own recommendations for reform, and therefore which will be slightly different and separate from these. So just to emphasise that independence first of all. The four things I suppose I wanted to say, which I think informed our discussions, I wanted to raise these four specifically because I think it emphasises the forward-looking nature of what we were trying to discuss and do. The first, what I call four truths, if you like, of the digital age. The first is that any new system in a digital era has to be voluntary. I don't hold with the all-data approach or some of the others who have said that organisations necessarily have to be compelled to be within a system because of three very simple reasons, one of which is who do you compel to be in the system, what do you compel them to be a part of, and what are the sanctions for those who are not a part of it. And in the digital age, I think it's very easy to exempt yourself from any system. So any system, I think, has to be voluntary, but it has to have enough incentives, and that means specifically legal and financial incentives, for people to want to be inside, for people to want to participate, and for people to be willing to put up with some potentially quite tough sanctions that remain within the system. The second is, I think any new system has to build in correction mechanisms. As Angela said, it seems perverse in a way that we now live in an era, a digital era, where it's so easy to allow people to respond, to allow people to comment, and yet still so few people do, and particularly do in a structured way, in the sort of right to reply way that Angela talks about. The third is that any new system and any new ethical system has to be transparent. I know that's a very overused word. I know that in the plurality discussion is going to follow from this one. Transparency is talked about in terms of the organisations themselves and the financial arrangements. I'm more talking specifically about the transparency of the journalism. When anyone can publish, and anyone does, to distinguish journalism, one has to actually start to work out ways in which to make clear that it is journalism, to make clear basic information about it when it was published, who authored it, who published it, etc. And indeed to make clear what principles it adheres to, if any. To essentially signpost it as journalism, as opposed to PR or commercial copy or whatever. And the fourth truth, I think, that any system has to recognise is the need and the role of good journalism in a democracy. And again, that harks back to what Andrew was saying about the public interest defences. Proper public interest defences within the law, such that journalists are more protected when it comes to things like regulation of investigative powers, the Citizens in Public Life, the Official Secrets Act, the Bribery Act, etc. But having that privilege and having that defence obviously comes with quid pro quo. And that quid pro quo